So we're starting Genesis. Genesis is the Greek name from the Hebrew name Bereshith.
It's time to change your world. It's time to let it go. The things you used to think, the things you used to know, they don't help you anymore. It's time to change your mind. If it's peace you want to find.
This is Kurt Kaikonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Change Your World, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bible. We'll be starting in chapter 25.
It's time to change your world. You need to let it go. Oh, oh.
So now we're going to begin today with Abraham, and he took another wife after Sarah's death. And this was a lower status wife. It was a concubine, and her name was Keturah. And she bears him 6 more sons. And these 6 sons, like Ishmael, they were sent away from Canaan because they also were not the sons of promise. And when they were grown, they were sent eastward, not only with gifts, but they were sent away with the love of their father. But the land of Canaan, well, that was for Isaac, and that was for Isaac alone. And also what Isaac received was all of Abraham's great wealth. And the only one of these 6 sons that really stands out to me when I read the scriptures is the son Midian, because a people came from him, and those people, they will cross the paths with Israel later on. And so now Abraham, he dies, and he's 175 years old. And then his first 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, they come together, and they come to bury him. And they bury him in that cave with his wife over in Machpelah. And this was the only property that Abraham ever owned in the land of Canaan. And I think it says a lot that Ishmael was there, because it shows about the love that he did have for his father. And now in this, he comes together with his brother, and you can see that they have peace in the end. And then Isaac, he returns to Beer Laharoi, and he's living there with Rebekah. And that's the same place where they were married. And then we're told the names of Ishmael's children. And all his sons, they're all called princes. And then Ishmael, he dies. And he dies among his brethren. And that was the prophecy that had been given about Ishmael from the beginning, that he will dwell among his brethren. And now he fulfilled that. And now he dies among them. And so now we're done with Ishmael. And now we get to talk about Isaac, and we talk about his adult life. And Isaac, there's only 6 chapters given to the whole life of Isaac. And there's only 1 verse in the New Testament that even mentions Isaac. And that's over in Hebrews 11:9. And it just mentions his name. It doesn't even say anything about him. Because Isaac, he is the son of a famous father. And his life, it wasn't as turbulent as Abraham's. He lived more of a regular lifestyle. And he has wealth, and he has herds, and we see him become even a farmer for a little while. But he had no wars, and he didn't fight over wells like his father did. Isaac, he enjoyed a life of solitude. And it's just like when we first met him in the field, when he was out there meditating, when he first saw Rebekah, his wife. But Isaac, he was a man of prayer like his father. And then when he discovered that his wife, Rebekah, was barren, because they had waited for 20 years for her to conceive, that Isaac, he went and he prayed for his wife, and God heard him. So Isaac, he was married at the age of 40, and now Rebekah, she's pregnant, and Isaac's now 60 years old. So we can assume by that Rebekah, she has to at least be in her later 30s, and she could even be up into her mid-40s. And this pregnancy is rough. It's abnormal because there's way too much movement going on. And the word used in Hebrew actually meant to crush. So she was being crushed inside. another translation will say she was oppressed inside. But you see here that Rebekah, that she also was a woman of prayer, because she goes to the Lord to inquire about her condition. And the Lord, you see here, that he wants to tell her what's going on. And he's not just answering her curiosity, because he wants to tell her some things. Because God could have just told her that she's going to have twins, but he doesn't do that. He not only tells her that they are twins, but that these two, that they're not even of the same nation. And that these two nations, the younger one, God has chosen for his nation. And the other, the older, he would be subject to that younger one. So the Lord, he revealed a lot of information that she wasn't even asking about, because God wanted her to know that this was his will and that this was his choice. This is God's choice. And he made this choice before they were ever born. And that's just like us. God has chosen us to be in Christ before we were ever born. So now, after this long, hard pregnancy, that day finally comes, and here comes this first baby, and he has red hair. Maybe he looked like JD or something. But this baby with red hair, he was covered all over his whole body. And so they named him Harry, because that's exactly what Esau means. Esau means hairy. And he had a nickname, and his nickname was Red. And that's what Edom means. Edom means red. And that's actually the name of the nation that Esau's kingdom, the one that he founded, it was called Edom. And so now the second baby comes out, and he wasn't red, and he wasn't hairy at all. In fact, he didn't have much hair on his body. He was actually a smooth baby. But this baby, he did the cutest thing, because when he came out, he was holding on to his brother's heel. And so they named him Jacob. Now, Jacob, that means may God protect. But see, it sounds just like heel catcher. And they did that on purpose. And though it was really cute when they did this, but this name has a meaning of watch from behind you, or he'll overtake you, or it means he'll deceive. He will trip you up. And these boys, even though they're twins, and they didn't look anything alike, they were very different. In fact, they couldn't have been any more different from each other. Esau, well, he's a sportsman. He loves the outdoor. He's handsome. He has the hair. He has the smile. He's your all-American, all-state varsity athlete. All the girls wanted to know him, and all the boys wanted to be him. And in the world's eyes, he had it all. He's the one you probably would have liked. He's likable. He's Esau. And so it was really easy for his father to favor him, because he was exactly what his father wanted to be. He was an athlete. He was rugged. He was tough. He was cool. He was Steve McQueen cool. He was Clint Eastwood. He was a man's man, self-sufficient. And the best of it is he brought Isaac meat. And Isaac loved barbecued meats. And then you have Jacob. Well, he's a little nerdy. He's sitting at mama's table. And the Bible calls him mild. But the word mild here, it doesn't mean he was weak, and it doesn't mean he was womanly, but it has the sense of wholeness, that he was a whole man. And he was probably often in the kitchen helping mama cook, because he was her favorite. And for these people, them having favorites in this family, it really didn't help anybody. But Jacob, he was so smart. In fact, he was clever. Jacob, he probably reminded Rebekah of her own brother. He probably was a lot like Laban, and he could talk. Oh, and he could make a deal, and he could always get the upper hand, and he'd always get away with it. He could make you laugh. Esau couldn't do that. Esau wasn't clever. And Jacob, he knew that his dad liked Esau better. And Jacob, he would have loved to have been Esau. But Esau, he would never want to be like Jacob. And Jacob knew that he would never measure up to his older brother Esau in his dad's eyes. And so he had to develop something. And so he developed living by his wit. He developed his trickery. And he could spin a really good story because he was never going to be able to compete with his brother physically. So he had to find a way for him to survive in this family, in this household, somehow. But his mama loved him. And he probably sat there on the stool in the kitchen while Harry and Dad, they're in the other room, and they're talking about football or wrestling or about hunting. And they probably talked about how many of those local girls had crushes on Esau. And Jacob would be sitting there on his stool in the kitchen, and he'd be stirring a bowl of carob chip cookies, with nuts. And he'd say, Dad'll never like me. He always likes Esau better. Esau, he's so handsome. All the girls like Esau, and they won't even talk to me. They just kick sand in my face and laugh because I'm so skinny and awkward. And then they just run away. And then Rebekah, she'd say something like, oh, Jacob, I think you're good looking. You're so good looking. So much better than Esau. You have that fine, smooth alabaster skin. Those Canaanite girls, they don't know anything. God has big things for you, Jacob. And I know because God told me you're going to be successful and so much more important than your brother Esau. And then Jacob would go, thanks, Mom. You're not just saying that because you're my mom, right? And Jacob must have thought that all the moms said that to their nerdy little boys. But it was true. God did say that. And he told Rebekah. And his father, Isaac, he also knew that that was true. But even though Isaac knew that God had already picked Jacob, he was still determined to give that birthright to Esau. And that's because he liked Esau better. He wanted to give that to Esau because Esau was that son he always wanted. He was the one that he could admire in his heart. He was the one that he would pick to represent him. And if he could have his way, he would give it to him. And he thought that he could have his way because he was the father. He was the patriarch. But just as much as Esau was good at hunting, Jacob was an outstanding cook. And hunters, they can have off days where they're just walking around the woods with nothing to show for it, but they still need to eat. And so Esau, he comes out of the field, and he's tired, and he's hungry. And he can smell Jacob's stew, and it smells great, and it looks great. It's all red. It's a really red, hearty stew. And Esau, he asks his brother to feed him. And Jacob, he should have, because that's the right thing to do. But Jacob, he doesn't let an opportunity get away from him. And it's not like Jacob was planning this, but you can't really let a moment like this pass by because he's the heel catcher. And it's his nature to take advantage of you when you're down. And he is so clever. But what he says to him is absurd. And Jacob says, sell me your birthright. And Esau, he should have just got up and he should have walked away. Because the birthright means that you're going to be the head of the family after the passing of the father. And it also means in the birthright that you're also awarded the double portion of all the inheritance. So being born about 5 minutes earlier in this family, it really, really paid off. And it's only this family and only this one family that it meant so much more than being in any other family, because in this family, the promises of Abraham were included with that birthright. And that was the promise of the land, and that's the promise of the Messiah being able to come through your line. So this is an absurd request, and nobody in their right mind would ever agree to this. But this also shows you how much that birthright meant to Jacob, because he probably thought about it all the time. This wasn't just a random request off the top of his head, but it also shows you how little it meant to Esau, because he never thought about it, because he didn't care about spiritual things. He had no place in him for God or for the things of God. And so Esau says, look, I'm about to die. So what is this birthright to me? And Esau, he's not saying here, I'm going to die if I don't get any food. It wasn't like he was starving to death. But what he is saying, he's saying, I'm going to die one day. So what do I care about birthrights? And the thing is that God, he knew all this about Esau before Esau was ever born. And that's why he didn't pick him. Because see, there's another truth here. Jacob, he never needed to deceive his brother Esau out of the birthright because it was already his. God had already said he was giving it to Jacob. He had given it to him before he was ever born because God knew them. And that's just like he knows us. He knows us before we're ever born. The Bible's clear that he has predestined in the same way good works for us as believers before we were ever born. Because God knows those who will love him, and he knows those who don't love him, and he knows those who will come to him, and he knows those who will never come to him, because he foreknew them. And that's just like how he foreknew us. And we get a little detail in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16, where it describes Esau to us. And it says, Esau was a profane person. And profane person means that he was a godless person. And it also describes him as a fornicator, because Esau, he loves all the worldly, fleshy things. He has no place for God in his life, so God has no place for him. And this birthright, it was the greatest heritage of all peoples ever, the whole world. And Esau, he traded it for a lunch, for a bowl of soup. And so when he left there, he just wiped his mouth and he walked away, and he never thought about it. He didn't think about it until another day, until his father brought it up. And now we get a break from the families of Rebekah and Isaac, and we get a little break from the competition between the twins. And we're told about the second famine that was ever recorded in the land of Canaan. And now Isaac, he's going to be tested by God, just like his father was. And you have to realize that this event that comes after this little story about Jacob and Esau, it's not chronological. Because you see, Isaac would have had a really hard time passing Rebekah off as his sister, with these two grown boys running around calling her mama and calling him daddy. So this probably happened during those 20 years while they were waiting to have children. And this is about 100 years after Abram had the same exact trial with these same exact people in that land of Gerar. But it was probably a different Abimelech, since Abimelech is not his name, it's his title. Abimelech means king. And so with this second famine in the Bible, God appears to Isaac. Now, this is the first time we hear of God ever appearing to Isaac. We know that that he heard God's voice on Mount Moriah when he was being spared from being sacrificed. But now God appears to him and he tells him not to go to Egypt, which tells us that he probably was planning on going to Egypt because that's what his dad did in the first famine. And if you notice, he follows in his father's footsteps quite a bit. He follows him in the good things, and he also follows him in the bad things. Because fathers, they have a lot of influence on their sons. And this father and son, they were very different in their natures and their personalities. But sons, they follow their fathers. And then after God appeared this time, he made to Isaac all the same promises that he made to his father Abraham, about his descendants being like the stars of heaven, and that through his seed, all the nations would be blessed. And so here again, we hear about this seed that we've heard about from the beginning, in the very beginning of Genesis in the garden. And this seed is the coming of the Messiah, which is Jesus. And God tells Isaac it's not because of him. He's not doing this because of Isaac or what Isaac has done. He's doing it because of his father Abraham's obedience to him. And so now Isaac, he's in Gerar, and he's in the same exact place that his dad was. And you have to remember, Isaac, he's probably heard of all of Abraham's journeys. And he probably heard about how his dad had been afraid of these Philistines and how he thought that they would take him and kill him because of Isaac's mother, Sarah. And it probably was true. They could have killed him because these people, they don't believe in adultery, but they're okay with murder. That doesn't bother these people. And so now Isaac, he's afraid of these Philistines, and he's afraid of them taking his wife and killing him for Rebekah, because Rebekahs are usually pretty good looking. But he shouldn't be afraid, because you see, God had just appeared to him and told him to dwell there. And he just revealed all these promises that he was going to do in his life. But instead of believing God and trusting him, it's easier to lie, because his dad did. And this is not like it's a generational curse. But see, sometimes children, they can justify to themselves that it's okay to be like their parents. Like, dad smokes, so I can smoke. Or dad drinks, so I can drink. Or dad cheats on his taxes. Or dad lies when it's important. Because children will imitate their fathers in the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they'll even think they're cool doing it, like Clint Eastwood.
You need to change your world. You need to let it go. Oh.
Thanks for listening to Change Your World. Change Your World is an outreach of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, and your neighborhood church. If you're listening to Change Your World in the Detroit metro area, why don't you join us for church this Sunday? Our service time is 10 a.m. at Calvary Chapel, Waterford, 183 South Winding Drive, Waterford, Michigan. We're competing with the Catholics. It's only an hour. All the donuts you can eat, and you don't have to believe a thing we say, but it could change your world.
You need to change your world.
The rest of today's message can be heard at yourneighborhoodchurch.org. So check us out and download the app. And until next week, remember,